Fibonacci. We all have heard of this name many times. Some of you in your maths class and some of you who have been there in the market and try to dabble with technical analysis. You all have heard this Fibonacci ratios, etc. But little do we know that Fibonacci concepts work very well in the markets. But how to use them is what this webinar is all about. This webinar talks about Fibonacci retracements, talks about Fibonacci projections, and also Fibonacci extensions. That's not all. In this webinar, Dr. Naran will show you how these ratios are to be constructed, how these Fibonacci ratios, the mathematical constructs, are applied on the price action, and after understanding that, find out the ideal entry and exit opportunities. Beautiful, isn't it? We all want to know when to enter the market, and Fibonacci provides us very good opportunities. There are concepts called clusters which gives you a very low risk point for entry. So one should always ensure that understanding every aspect of Fibonacci is important. So at the end of this webinar, what you'll be learning is how to understand the Fibonacci concepts and ensure that you're able to spot entry and exit opportunities and have appropriate profit making methods. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for that introduction. And from my side, a warm welcome to all of you for this particular seminar called Profitable Fibonacci Trading. Like Raja explained to you all, what we are going to look at is what is this Fibonacci business all about, and how do they apply to the markets, and how are we to use it so that we can take advantage of whatever the market is trying to say to us, and we will be able to profit out of that particular knowledge. So Fibonacci, some of you have answered that you do not know, so I will go over it briefly. I was going to go over it anyway, because many times we think we know, but we also find that it's not so clear. And therefore, once the program starts and we sort of, kind of dive off the deep end, it becomes difficult to pull back and ask basic questions. But fear not, wherever you feel less clear, I think we can pause or type in the question there. I have Raja and a couple of others of my staff standing by to answer your questions as we go along. So don't wait for the end, and let's sort of kind of get rolling. So what I'll do is I'll switch off the video so that the bandwidth thing improves. Even though it would be nice to be present talking to you face to face throughout this particular program, I think we have to be realistic about the fact that people from various places in India are logged into this, and the net connectivity might not be very fluid in all areas across the country. So video does hog a lot of bandwidth. So I think you can do without staring at me through the next 2 hours. Instead, I would want you to concentrate all your attention on the various charts that I'll be showing you, the various points in theory that we will be making, so that you have your undivided attention on the matter, and the learning can happen in a smooth and undisturbed way. All right. So let's dive into the matter, as it were. Profitable Fibonacci Trading, Part 1 today. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, here is the man behind it all. Okay, so he's Leonardo da Fibonacci, said to be a 12th or 13th century mathematician from Italy who came out with what is known as a summation series. And now this summation series was named after him and therefore called as the Fibonacci summation series. And everything has emerged out of that. And what we are going to learn today is also from the summation series as well as properties emerging out of that particular series, right? So to this man goes the credit. If you go to read about him, you will also learn that in one of those many avenues that they have in Italy, there is a statue put up of Leonardo of Pisa, right? So he has been rightfully recognized and acknowledged as one of the masters whose work transcends all areas of life, and therefore it has been adopted into the market as well. So let's go ahead and look at what is behind this Fibonacci summation series. And here is what it is. For those who know, it'll be just a repetition. For those who don't, this is how we get our summation series. It is the sum of any two numbers, right? So since the first two numbers are 0 and 1, we start obviously with those and we add to get 0 plus 1, 1, 1 plus 1, 2, 2 plus 1, 3, 3 and 2, 5, and that is what I have described there. So those who read it, it'll be self-evident, and this gives you a series of numbers, and this is how the sequence will look, right? 1 plus 1, 2, 2 plus 1, 3, 3 and 2, 5, 5 and 3, 8, 8 and 5, 13, 13 and 8, 21, and so on and so forth. This is an endless sequence of numbers which keep happening over and over again, right? Over and over again in the sense that not that the numbers repeat, but that the mathematics behind the numbers in the sequence repeat. Every two numbers, so the next number here will be 610 plus 377. That will give you 987 as your next number. And then 1597 will become your next number, and so on and so forth. Alright, so that's your Fibonacci summation series. So this is one part, and this is the basic part from which another aspect emerges, which is actually called as the Fibonacci ratio. And it is really the Fibonacci ratio that we are going to be concerned with and that we are going to use rather extensively in the market. We will also be using the Fibonacci summation series, but in a rather limited kind of way. What we will be using rather extensively is the Fibonacci ratio. And when you say ratio, obviously it is one number divided by another number. Now you have a series here, so you got lots of numbers. So you can divide one number by another, either going from smaller to larger or larger to smaller. You can go up in the summation series with your division, creating various ratios, or you can go down in the summation series, again creating similar ratios. So that is where we get our ratios from, and here is how it looks. Now we can get many ratios, of course, but I am going to put down about 6 of them. And let's look at each of them because each of them is going to be significant. Number 1 ratio, smaller number divided by next bigger number. Okay, the operative word here is the next bigger number. Alright, so 8, the next immediate number is going to be 13, right? After 8 is 13, so 8 divided by 13, or after 13 comes 21, so smaller number divided by next bigger number, 13 divided by 21. After 21 comes 34. So 21 divided by 34, smaller number by next bigger number. If you do this division, no matter at what stage in the Fibonacci summation series you would actually carry out this particular division, the output of that will always be 0.618. Okay, so smaller number by next bigger number, the output will always be 0.618. The larger the number you go to, 377 by 610, 610 by 987, 987 by 1597, 3 digits, 4 digits, 5 digits, 6 digits, the numbers will become purer and purer, tending towards 0.618. When you do it at 8 divided by 13, it will not be 0.618, it will be closer to something like 0.615. But as you go up in the scale, 13 by 21, 21 by 34, 34 by 55, 55 by 89, and so on, the number will start to go more and more towards 0.618. Alright, so that is the first of the ratios. So is this clear, right? I trust if anybody is not clear what is being done at any point of time, please feel free to type into the chat. Either my staff will answer or they will deflect the question to me and I shall re-explain or clarify whatever may be the difficulty. Okay, ratio number 2 is the reverse of this. So I am going to do a bigger number divided by a previous smaller number. So it's the exact inverse of this. So I do 34 by 21, or I do 21 by 13, or I do 13 by 8, or I do 55 by 34. So bigger number divided by smaller number, very clearly the ratio has to be greater than 1 because all these numbers are bigger than the divisor, right? So what you will find is that this will generally tend towards 1.618. That is, as you go larger and larger in the number, 89 by 55, 144 by 89, 233 by 144, and so on, you will find that the number becomes purer and purer towards 1.618. Okay, so immediate numbers smaller by the next bigger, 0.618. Immediate numbers bigger number by the previous smaller number, 1.618. Okay, got that? These are the two basic Fibonacci ratios, the most important ones. Then we come to the next set of ones. Now we come to number 3. Now instead of the next bigger number, we take the second next bigger number. So after 8 was 13 and after 13 was 21. So if you take 8 and instead of 13 you divide it by the second next bigger number, which would be 21, or similarly here you had 21 divided by 34, but after 34 will come 55. So if you do 21 divided by 55 or 34 divided by 89 and so on, that is smaller number divided by the second next bigger number, then there is a constant ratio of 0.382. As in the earlier ones, as you go to the larger and larger numbers, the number will become purer and purer to 0.382. Okay, so this is the next divisor, right? Similarly now, like we did in number 2, we do the same thing in number 4. We will reverse this particular process to get another ratio. So here we take the bigger number and divide it by the second previous smaller number. Okay, so instead of 21 divided by 55, we do 55 divided by 21, or 89 divided by 34, or 21 divided by 8, or we do 144 divided by 55, or 233 divided by 89, right? So if you have 233, then before that number is 144, and before that number will be 89. So that is why it will be 233 divided by 89, and so on. So bigger number divided by second previous smaller number will now give you a ratio of 2.618. You're beginning to see a pattern here. Everything is getting centered around 0.618, 1.618, 2.618, and so on. And then we got these numbers, but then they will also fall into place when I explain something more to you. But for the time being, stick with me here. So 4 ratios: smaller by next bigger, 0.618. Bigger by one previous smaller number, 1.618. Smaller by second next bigger, 0.382. Bigger by second previous smaller, 2.618. I trust second previous smaller and all won't be confusing. By now you have an idea. That's why there's illustration here, so you know exactly what's going on. And now for number 5 and number 6, we just do the same thing again, but we take the third next bigger or the third previous smaller. The same process we repeat. Next bigger, second next bigger, third next bigger. Previous smaller, second previous smaller, third previous smaller. Alright. So third next bigger will be 8, next bigger 13, second next bigger 21, third next bigger is 34. So 8 divided by 34, or 21, next bigger 34, next bigger 55, third bigger 89. So 21 divided by 89, and so on, will give you 0.236. Alright, and the exact reverse process of that, bigger number, that is 34 or 89 or 144, divided by third previous smaller number, 4.236. Alright, so this is how the ratios are arrived at. I'm sure there are some of you who have come across Fibonacci straight when they used the software. And software doesn't really have any kind of explanation on this. It just lumps it together. So this is how these numbers are derived, and the constancy of the ratio is the beauty behind the Fibonacci summation series. That is what gives it the power. That is what gives it the consistency. And that is what gives it the forecasting capability that we shall harness when we try and apply this to the market. Okay, more about that later. Now let's just sum up this entire set of calculation into 2 groups. You got a bigger group, 1.618, 2.618, 4.236, all numbers bigger than 1, right? Those are expansion over 1, right? When something is more than 1, it is an expansion. So that is why I'm calling them as expansion ratios. 1.618, 2.618, 4.236 are all expansion ratios. In contrast to that, 0.236, 0.382 or 0.618 are all less than 1, and therefore they are all contractions of 1, and therefore they are all called contraction ratios, right? Why am I saying 1? Because that anything and everything is 1. You take something and divide it to get contraction. You take something and expand it to get expansions, right? So either 1 gets contracted. If you do it through the Fibonacci ratios, then 1 gets contracted progressively to 0.618, 0.382, 0.236. And when you expand 1, you get 1.618, 2.618, 4.236. Alright, so this is the grouping of our Fibonacci ratios. Something you want to keep in mind because it's going to reappear later. Okay, let's move on. Any questions at this stage? Please type them into the chat box so that my staff can answer. Right. Next up, we'll go and study these ratios a little more. Now contraction. Now you saw contraction as 0.618, contraction of 1 will gives you 0.618. If you expand 1 by 0.618, then you will get 1.618, right? So 0.618 is the key. That's going to be the key, right? So now let's see what is the contraction series. Now I have 1, okay? And then we are going to contract that. So 0.618. So if you do 1 into 0.618, that is A into B, you will get 0.618. Now this is your new number. Now if you take this new number and plonk it into A and then try to contract this, and if 0.618 is our contraction ratio, then if you contract 0.618 by 0.618, what you will essentially have to do is multiply A by B, and what do you get? You get 0.382. So 0.382 is nothing but a 0.618 contraction of 0.618 itself. Let me repeat that. 0.382 is nothing else but a 0.618 contraction or reduction of 0.618 itself. 0.618 in turn is a reduction of 1. So if you start with 1 and go in sections of 0.618, which is the constant ratio during expansion and contraction, then you will find that 0.618 itself, when it is contracted, goes to 0.382, and when 0.382 is contracted by the same ratio, you get 0.236.